A long time ago, in the village of Akko, there lived a bold and beautiful woman called Zina. Unlike every other young woman in her late 20s who desired to be married to a young man, she had no interest in such things. To her, relationships were business. She traded her body for wealth, living on her own terms. Many married women in the village shamed her severely, and she would respond saying, "It's not my fault your husbands prefer my hips to yours." Her sharp, confident voice often echoed through the marketplace, drawing amused glances from passers-by. When the younger women teased her about being unmarried, Zina would laugh at them in the face and say, "You and your starving husbands can't even afford 3 square meals." The men of Akko were captivated by her. She had mastered the art of seduction, from the subtle sway of her hips as she walked through the village to the intoxicating perfumes she wore, crafted from rare local herbs. Once a man had her, he always came back for more. Rumors whispered that even the king had fallen under her spell. She was unstoppable. Zina was attractive, rich and influential, a true force to be reckoned with. One evening, while strolling through the village, her intricately woven head wrap catching the golden rays of the setting sun, Zina overheard an exciting piece of gossip. A rich chief named Toba was coming to do business in Akko. Chief Toba was no ordinary man. He was the biggest palm nut exporter in the East. That was a jackpot. All day, Zina thought of how much she could get from the chief if she successfully went to bed with him. It would be the biggest deal she had gotten in almost 2 years. The next day, Zina sought out her trusted contacts to gather every detail about Chief Toba, when he would arrive, where he would stay, and his purpose in Ako. She met them in secluded corners of the village, under the shade of large baobab trees, ensuring their conversation. When she had gotten the information, she began her preparations. During the day, Zina secluded herself, indulging in beauty rituals to perfect her appearance. She spent hours applying shea butter to her skin until it gleamed under the sun. In the evenings, when the sun was down, she took long walks to stay fit, met with her tailor to design stunning dresses embroidered with gold threads, and quietly gathered more information about the chief. By the time he arrived, Zina was ready. Her sources informed her that the chief had come to buy hectares of land to expand his business in Akko. So, in the evening, while he was inspecting the land, Zina made her way there, her bold patterned dress flowing in the evening breeze, and strategically waited for him. As he finished his inspection, on his way out, Zina walked past him with her head held high. Nobody could convince her that she was not the most beautiful woman in the world. Chief Toba stopped in his tracks. He had seen beauty, but this woman was a revelation. The glow of the setting sun seemed to dance on her radiant skin, and her every movement exuded confidence. She swept him off his feet with her elegance. Immediately he approached her, and she reluctantly answered him, behaving like she had not come there to see him. "Young maid, I do not want to keep you out here for too long. Please, can I send my guards to bring you to my home? I would like to discuss something important with you," the chief said. Zina glanced at the men surrounding him and noticed one of her contacts among them. Smiling inwardly, she decided to change her approach. Without a word, she walked away, her anklets jingling softly with every step, knowing her contact would guide the chief back to her. But also, she knew that this would increase his longing for her. As expected, later in the evening, The chief visited her home with the help of her contact. He sent her maid to call her, but Zina sent word back that she would not be able to come out as it was almost her bedtime. She added that if he was interested in seeing her, he should return the following morning. The chief felt insulted, but he just wanted to speak to this beauty by all means. The next morning, Chief Toba arrived at Zina's house promptly, as if she were the hectares of land he had come to buy. Well, Zina knew she had him right where she wanted him. Briefly, he expressed himself, stating that he liked her and wanted to take care of her. Zina laughed and said, "Many men have offered, and I turned them down. What makes you so different from them?" The chief waved his hand like he had expected such questions, and immediately the guards he came with placed gifts of gold and pearls at her feet. Zina jubilated in her heart. She had not even gone to bed with him, and he had already enriched her. She asked the chief to come back in the night, and of course he did. That night they lay together. For the entirety of the chief's stay, Zina spent every night with him, and every day she received wonderful gifts from him. When he finally left, he promised he would call her to be his companion when he was traveling to other villages. But Zina did not care so much about that. What he had given her was more than she bargained for. As she watched the chief leave, she said to herself, "The game is mine to play, and I always win." But she was wrong. She had played a dangerous game this time. The chief had 3 terrible wives who had sworn to scare any woman the chief showed interest in so they could protect their children's inheritance. When the chief returned, they received feedback from one of his guards about his escapades with Zina. The wives were furious, especially when they heard about the many gifts he had given her. "This woman must be stopped. It might become something serious. We cannot afford to let our husband marry her," one of them said, slamming her hand on the low wooden table in their grand courtyard. The others, dressed in elaborate wrappers and beads, nodded in agreement. When Chief Toba traveled again for business, the wives gathered a group of strong men and journeyed to Akko, determined to confront Zina. The journey was long, passing through dense forests and dusty roads, but their anger kept them focused. Just like fate would have it, when they asked around in the village, a woman told them that she had seen Zina heading to the market square. The woman, who held a grudge because Zina had laid with her husband in the past, happily led them straight to Zina. The market square was bustling with activity. Women sold vegetables and spices under colorful umbrellas. Children ran barefoot chasing each other, and the smell of roasting plantains wafted through the air. As soon as the women saw Zina, she stood out in the crowd, dressed in a vibrant orange dress with gold embroidery. They brought out long whips they had concealed under their shawls and began to flog her in the middle of the market square, calling her derogatory names. The strong men attacked anyone who dared to interfere. One young boy, seeing the commotion, cried out, "Leave her alone," but was quickly silenced by a glare from one of the men. Not many interfered because the women felt Zina deserved what she was getting. Shoppers and traders paused their activities, some whispering in disapproval, while others watched in silent agreement. When the women had their fill, they left Zina lying in the mud, her dress torn and her body badly bruised. A crowd gathered but kept their distance, unsure of how to help. Zina cried for help, but nobody answered. The men avoided her, not wanting to anger their wives. However, there was a young man called C, who stood at a distance watching all that had happened. His fists clenched as he tried to suppress his anger. Initially, he had tried to intervene, but he could not overpower the strong men. Now that the coast was clear, he pushed through the onlookers and went over to Zina. He carefully lifted her from the ground, her limp body barely able to hold itself upright, and carried her home. The walk back to her house was silent, except for the sound of Sei's labored breathing and Zina's faint groans of pain. When he finally placed her on her bed, Zina weakly said, "Thank you so much. How can I ever repay you?" The man smiled, as if he had waited for that question all his life, and responded, "Do not worry. I will lay with you when you are strong enough. Just get well soon." Then immediately he went away, his sandals slapping against the wooden floor as he left. His intention was not pure. He was just one of the many men who wanted but could not afford Zina. When he saw a chance, he grabbed it with arms wide open. Zina began to weep, her tears soaking the pillow beneath her head. For the first time, she realized how much she had ruined her reputation. She thought of her late parents, how poor they had been, and how she had promised herself she would never live like them. But now she could not help but wonder, was it all worth it? She had been publicly shamed in the market square and had lowered herself by being with many men just to have food on her table. As the lantern in her room flickered weakly, Zina promised herself never to return to that lifestyle. She decided she would use all the money she had earned to make investments and live a comfortable lifestyle. Eventually, she let out a deep sigh, her body trembling from exhaustion, and slowly drifted off to sleep. Weeks passed, and Zina's body had healed, but she remained indoors because she was ashamed to face everyone. The once lively young woman who used to walk through the village with her head held high now stayed behind closed doors, her curtains drawn tight. One day, however, Chief Toba returned to visit her. When Zina heard from her maid that he had come, she sat on her bed, her heart racing. She sent word back saying she was not interested in seeing him. But the chief kept begging, saying that he had heard of her ordeal with his wives and had put measures in place to ensure it would not happen again. Zina discarded the promise she had made to herself. Her heart began to soften, and she let the chief in. He apologized again, expressing how much he missed her. Then he said, "Marry me, Zina. I have not been able to stop thinking about you." The room fell silent except for the faint chirping of birds outside the window. Zina was not shocked by his proposal. She had heard similar offers from men who had been with her, but she was particularly intrigued by his offer, or perhaps it came at the right time. She had chosen to forsake her old ways, and now she could live off his wealth for the rest of her life without ever worrying about money. She thought deeply about his offer, her fingers tracing the patterns on her embroidered blanket, and just before he left, she accepted his proposal. Zina found a new sense of confidence. She began to strut around the village with some of the guards the chief had left for her safety. Their uniforms gleamed in the sunlight, a constant reminder of her elevated status. The villagers did not have the audacity to speak recklessly to the great Chief Toba's future wife. Zina laughed in their faces, unprovoked, especially at those who mocked her on the day she was beaten up. "Were you really thinking Zina would be down forever?" she would say to them, her voice filled with defiance. "Never. I'm not like you, stuck in your hopelessness." Her boldness drew mixed reactions. Some admired her resilience, while others whispered insults under their breath, careful not to let her or the guards hear. Some of them even began to think that perhaps their good way of living profited them nothing. Women who once condemned her began to envy her newfound wealth and protection. Some even wondered aloud if her ways had been the better choice. One evening, as the cool breeze carried the scent of roasted yams from nearby fires, Zina sat by her window, waiting for Toba to arrive at her hut. She had instructed her maid to prepare a feast, filling the air with the aroma of spiced stew and freshly pounded yam. However, as the evening wore on, the oil lamps in her home burned low, and Toba was still nowhere to be seen. Just when she had given up on him coming, her door flung open. It was not Chief Toba, it was his first wife, flanked by two of the guards he had left to protect Zina. The sight of them sent a chill down her spine. Zina immediately recognized the woman, her expensive wrapper and matching headscarf signifying her position as the chief's senior wife. For a moment, Zina thought the guards were on her side, so she stood her ground, her voice steady as she said, "What do you want here?" But before she could say more, the guard stepped forward and pushed her down. The wife laughed at her stupidity, a cruel, mirthless sound that echoed in the small room. "You foolish girl," the woman sneered, handing Zina a gourd filled with a dark, ominous liquid. "Do you know how I labored with this man you want to marry? We started this business from scratch, and what do I get in return? He chose to marry more wives, but not any more wives, but not any more." Zina's hands trembled as she held the gourd, her mind racing. She glanced at the guards, their expressions cold and unyielding. She was trapped with nowhere to go. She tried to delay, her voice shaky as she said, "I have done nothing to you. Let me go, and I promise I will leave him alone." The woman only smirked, folding her arms as if she had all the time in the world. "Drink it," she commanded, "or would you rather I pour it down your throat?" Zina's heart pounded. She prayed silently, hoping Toba would arrive in time to save her. But one of the guards coldly informed her, "The chief is in a meeting and will not return tonight." Tears streamed down her face as she realized there was no escape. She begged for her life, her voice breaking, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The guards were loyal to the first wife, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords in silent warning. With no hope of help, Zina picked up the gourd and drank the solution slowly, her throat burning with each swallow. Either way, she knew they would not let her leave. The liquid was bitter, its taste laced with a sickening finality. When she finished, she dropped the gourd, her body trembling. The chief's wife sat in satisfaction, staring at Zina as she clutched her stomach in pain. Her smug smile did not waver as Zina collapsed onto the floor, her breathing shallow and labored. When Zina finally passed away, the woman rose from her seat, smoothing the wrinkles from her wrapper, and left the hut with her guards in tow, her footsteps echoing in the now silent room. The next morning, the village buzzed with the news of Zina's death. Some whispered in hushed tones about the first wife's involvement, while others speculated that Zina's reckless lifestyle had finally caught up with her. The market square, once filled with her vibrant presence, now seemed eerily quiet. The moral lesson of this story is linked to Matthew 16:26, which says, "And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" Zina was short-sighted. She wanted the pleasures of the world at any cost, forgetting that some things are too costly and not worth it. She squandered every opportunity for change and kept digging until she fell into her own pit, eventually losing her soul. In this journey of life, it is important to remember that every decision has consequences. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Zena's story, a powerful reminder that the choices we make today shape our future. As we reflect on her life, let us remember the value of integrity, the weight of consequences, and the importance of protecting our souls. Life offers us many paths, but only wisdom and humility lead to true fulfillment. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment on what resonated most with you. Until next time, stay inspired and take care.